Hello, everybody. My name is Zach Parrish. I'm the Programming and Partnership Coordinator here at the Bexley Public Library. Thank you all so much for coming out. I won't get in the way. We have 4 wonderful authors, poets, just all-around creative, brilliant people in Columbus, so I want to turn it over to them as soon as possible. I do just want to give like a quick layout of what why we're here. And so after each reader, we'll take a 5-minute break. You can help yourself to some snacks and refreshments, and then I'll be back up here introducing the next reader. So I hope you can stick around for most, if not all, of the afternoon. And I did just want to also say so this year would have marked, February 18th would have marked Toni Morrison's 95th birthday. And so there is there's a year-long statewide celebration all across Ohio put together by Literary Cleveland and Ohio Humanities. And so we're happy to be kind of on their event page. Thank you to the people doing the Ohio Celebrates Toni Morrison celebration for promoting and launching this initiative. So keep an eye out. Their website is ohiocelebratestoнимorrison.org, and there's events all around Ohio for the entire year. So please keep an eye out there. I also just wanted to plug Namwali Serpel will be here on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock with Dion Custer-Edwards talking about her new book on Morrison, which comes out on Tuesday. So if you're available on Thursday, we would love to see you all back in this room for a wonderful discussion. So this is our 4th year doing a Toni Morrison celebration at the Bexley Library. I keep on picking like obscure, or what I thought were like obscure interview pieces of Toni Morrison, and then like inevitably the first reader is like, I was gonna mention that. So, and to try to avoid that, I'm going to read a different author and try to tie it in today. In the brilliant novel, The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy, she has a passage that says, "The secret of the great stories is that they have no secrets. The great stories are the ones that you have heard and want to hear again, the ones you can enter anywhere and inhabit comfortably. They don't deceive you with thrills or trick endings. They don't surprise you with the unforeseen. They are as familiar as the house you live in or the smell of your lover's skin. You know how they end, and yet you listen as though you don't. In the way that although you know that one day you will die, you live as though you won't. In the great stories, you know who lives, who dies, who finds love, who doesn't, and yet you want to know again. That is their mystery and their magic." And I think that speaks to Toni Morrison's work. You can revisit any novel and it will meet you where you are. And it's why we can continue to do this afternoon celebration, because we could be reading the same things next year and it would hit us all in a different way. I'm going to bring up our first reader. We're very lucky and happy to have Ray Scott, who is a poet who has been writing poetry since she was a teenager. Scott has performed at celebrated open mic events around Columbus, like the Retired Writer's Block Poetry Mic, the Rhapsody and Refrain series, Harlem Renaissance Remix, and other events at the Streetlight Guild. If you haven't been there, it's right down the street. Please, they do incredible work. Scott Woods is doing incredible stuff all the time over there. And she's also a member of the writing cohort From Spark to Fire and is currently at work finishing her first collection of poems under the working title, I Made My Plate First. Please join me in welcoming Ray Scott.
Hello, everyone. Oh, I like that. How are you all feeling today? All right, good. You said warm? I guess so, compared to what we've had. So I'm gonna take a deep breath. My daughter, who's in the front, is asking me if I'm nervous, and I'm always nervous, but we turn that into good energy, right? So. I've been invited today to be a vessel for one of the greatest writers of our time. I would say the greatest writer of our time. And I could not be any more honored or thrilled to hold that space and share this stage with other like phenomenal writers and artists and mothers and women, Black women during Black History Month, and with you all. So first I want to thank the Bexley Library and thank Zach for thinking of me and considering me for what I'm calling this tradition. Like he said, it's the 4th year of many more to come, and I think it's a great thing to do this and contribute to Toni Morrison's legacy by speaking her name and making sure the generations beyond us know her work. So I think like most of us, a majority of us, I was introduced to Toni Morrison as a teenager. I believe it was in high school. It could have been in college, but I definitely reached out to my high school besties to confirm, and because it's been a long time since I've been in high school. So, and they agreed that we all did read The Bluest Eye when we were in high school. Thinking about this is significant to me because I went to a Catholic high school in the 90s, and I don't know how the curriculum was put together back then, but I imagine that someone made sure it was included. I don't know this for sure, but we had one Black woman English teacher in a Catholic high school with about a fistful of Black students in each grade. So I'm guessing that she suggested and maybe fought for that book to be in our curriculum, and I could be wrong, but however we ended up reading it, it speaks to me about the reach that Toni Morrison has with her work. So with The Bluest Eye, though, I don't often recall like specifics about things, but I can always remember how it made me feel in that moment. And back then in high school, The Bluest Eye, it filled me with like a lot of mystery and a lot of curiosity of what was unknown to me at that time, topics that maybe I was not privy to. And a lot of what occurred in the book felt deep and it felt unkind at the time. And as I reread it as an adult, I knew for sure that the depth of it, there was depth and it was certainly unkind. So in my adult life, I continued to read Song of Solomon, I watched Beloved, and just, yes, I did not read the book, I watched it, but still engaged in the work. I started Sula, put it down, picked it back up, put it down, and picked it back up one more time to prepare for this series, and then I just said, not right now. That one is hard for me. So, but the novel that evoked the most emotion and all sorts of emotion for me, and portions of it, like I was sharing with Rebecca, who I met earlier, and portions of it lives rent-free in my mind in like 11 years after reading it, is God Help the Child. So today I will read portions of that novel, and I'd like to explore as many characters as possible. When I tried to time this out, I couldn't get to them all, but we'll at least do Bride and Booker and Sweetness for sure. So before I get into it, one thing that my bio didn't mention is that I am a mother and a nurturer, and it's probably my superpower, right? And I also feel that Toni Morrison also owns motherhood as her superpower, or one of her superpowers. And as I've developed as a poet over the last 20 years, she has definitely served as a guide, someone to look up to, who gave me hope and showed me that I could really do poetry, right? Pursue it, and I could do it my own way. And how I could navigate through motherhood and still take part in my dreams and incorporate my children in my dreams and my work. So a lot of my writing is centered around my children because they truly are the best art I'll ever make. So I have a quote, I believe it came from an interview where she's talking about motherhood, so I want to open with that. There was something so valuable about what happened when one became a mother. For me, it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me. Liberating because the demands that children make are not the demands of a normal other. The children's demands on me were things that nobody ever asked me to do. To be a good manager, to have a sense of humor, to deliver something that somebody could use. And they were not interested in all of the things that other people were interested, like what I was wearing or if I were sensual. Somehow, all of the baggage that I had accumulated as a person about what was valuable just fell away. I could not only be me, whatever that was, but somebody actually needed me to be that. If you listen to your children, somehow you are able to free yourself from baggage and vanity and all sorts of things and deliver a better self, one that you like. The person that was in me that I liked best was the one my children seemed to want. So I pay homage to Mama Toni, right, as a mother to her children, a mother of writing, a mother to her craft, a mother to voice, and how she gave all the mothers in her novels a voice, whereas maybe us as an audience didn't always agree or love them, or maybe even hated them. Mama Toni made place for them in this world. And so I just wanted to honor her in that light because she has definitely been the light for me. So, all right, let's get into this book. So God Helped a Child is a novel that is in a contemporary setting. Came out in 2015. When I first seen the title, it reminded me of my grandmother who always told me, like, God bless a child who has their own, because you need to figure out how to get what you want for yourself, because I'm not going to give it to you. So when I cracked the book open, though, it was nothing like that. There was a lot of shock factors for me. So I'm going to read the opening chapter where we are introduced to sweetness for you guys. It's not my fault, so you can't blame me. I didn't do it and have no idea how it happened. It didn't take more than an hour after they pulled her out from between my legs to realize something was wrong, really wrong. She was so black, she scared me. Midnight black, Sudanese black. I'm light-skinned with good hair, what we call high yellow, and so is Lula Ann's father. Ain't nobody in my family anywhere near that color. Tar is the closest I could think of, yet her hair don't go with the skin. It's different, straight but curly, like those naked tribes in Australia. You might think she's a throwback, but throwback to what? You should have seen my grandmother. She passed for white and never said another word to any one of her children. Any letters she got from my mother or my aunts, she sent right back unopened. Finally, they got the message of no message and let her be. Almost all mulatto tops and quadroons did that back in the day, if they had the right kind of hair, that is. Can you imagine how many white folks have Negro blood running and hiding in their veins? Guess. 20%, I heard. My own mother, Lula May, could have passed easy, but she chose not to. She told me the price she paid for that decision. When she and my father went to the courthouse to get married, there were 2 Bibles, and they had to put their hands on the one reserved for Negroes. The other one was for white people's hands. The Bible. Can you beat it? My mother was a housekeeper for a rich white couple. They ate every meal she cooked and insisted she scrub their backs while they sat in the tub, and God knows what other intimate things they made her do. But no touching of the same Bible. Some of you probably think it's a bad thing to group ourselves according to skin color, the lighter, the better, in social clubs, neighborhoods, churches, sororities, even colored schools. But how else can we hold on to a little dignity? How else can you avoid being spit on in a drugstore, shoving elbows at the bus stop, walking in the gutter to let whites have the whole sidewalk, charged a nickel at the grocers for a paper bag that's free to white shoppers? Let alone all the name calling. I heard about all of that and much, much more. But because of my mother's skin color, she wasn't stopped from trying on hats in the department stores or using their ladies' room. And my father could try on shoes in the front part of the shoe store, not in a back room. Neither one would let themselves drink from a colored-only fountain, even if they were dying of thirst. I hate to say it, but from the very beginning, in the maternity ward, the baby, Lula Ann, embarrassed me. Her birth skin was pale like all babies, even African ones, but it changed fast. I thought I was going crazy when she turned blue-black right before my eyes. I know I went crazy for a minute because once, just a few seconds, I held a blanket over her face and pressed. But I couldn't do that, no matter how much I wish she hadn't been born with that terrible color. I even thought of giving her away to an orphanage someplace, and I was scared to be one of those mothers who put their babies on church steps. Recently, I heard about a couple in Germany, white as snow, who had a dark-skinned baby nobody could explain. Twins, I believe. One white, one colored, but I don't know if it's true. All I know is that for me, nursing her was like having a pickaninny suck in my teeth. I went to bottle feeding soon as I got home. My husband, Louis, is a porter, and when he got off the rails, he looked at me like I was really crazy and looked at her like she was from the planet Jupiter. He wasn't a cussing man, so when he said, "God damn, what the hell is this?" I knew we were in trouble. That's what did it, what caused the fights between me and him. It broke our marriage to pieces. We had 3 good years together, but when she was born, he blamed me and treated Lula Ann like she was a stranger, more than that, an enemy. He never touched her, never did convince him that I ain't never, ever fooled around with another man. He was dead sure I was lying. We argued and argued till I told him her blackness must be from his own family, not mine, and that's when it got worse. So bad, he just up and left, and I had to look for another, cheaper place to live. I knew enough not to take her with me when I applied to landlords, so I left her with a teenage cousin to babysit. I did the best I could and didn't take her outside much anyway because I pushed her in the baby carriage. Friends or strangers would lean down and peek in to say something nice and then give a start or jump back before frowning. That hurt. I could have been the babysitter if our skin colors were reversed. It was hard enough just being a colored woman, even a high yellow one, trying to rent in a decent part of the city. Back in the 90s, when Lula Ann was born, the law was against discriminating in who you could rent to, but not many landlords paid attention to it. They made up reasons to keep you out, but I got lucky with Mr. Lee. I know he upped the rent $7 from what he advertised, and he has a fit if you are a minute late with the money. I told her to call me Sweetness instead of Mother or Mama. It was safer. Being that black and having what I think are 2 thick lips calling me Mama would confuse people. Besides, she has funny colored eyes, crow black with a blue tint, something witchy about them too. So it was just us 2 for a long while, and I don't have to tell you how hard it is being an abandoned wife. I guess Louis felt a little bit bad after leaving us like that because a few months later on, he found out where I moved to and started sending the money once a month, though I never asked him to and didn't go to court to get it. His $50 money orders and my night job at the hospital got me and Lula Ann off welfare. And so she goes on to say that things had got better, and she was very careful how I raised her. I had to be strict, very strict. Lula Ann needed to learn how to behave, how to keep her head down and not to make trouble. I don't care how many times she changes her name. Her color is a cross she will always carry, but it's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not my fault. It's not. So, my first thought, I love how Toni Morrison tells a story, right? Because when I read...
Could you speak into the microphone?
Oh, yeah. Is that better? Okay. So,
Thank you.
yes, ma'am. So when I read, it's like a blank canvas, right? And then, so just for side note, this is why it's always important to read the book first so you can create your own world. Once you see the movie, I always tell the kids that, try to encourage them to read. So, but she paints the narrative like in such a way that the canvas in my mind, it gets touched on several like different places, and I'm always taking inventory of what's to come. And she is like the story building G to me. So you build it up and you will never forget all the intricacies as you move along in the story. And I find myself going, oh, okay, now I see. Like anytime I read her work, I just love how she builds on things. So my second thought on that first, or that introduction to this book, when I reread this, is I really had to like question the time period, right? Because it was in the 90s, and it kind of threw me because I was reading it like, what year is this? You know, are we really still like hiding our children because of their dark complexion and to avoid being denied rent or just being discriminated against and being overcharged? And it just took me back. But I mean, I guess in my mind, that just should not be the world that we live in. And unfortunately, that's the reality. That people are still treated unfairly because of the color of their skin, and time just doesn't exempt hatred. So I had to rest with that. And then my third thought is we've been introduced to a mother that's hard to love because she is making a choice to deny love to her daughter because of the color of her skin. And then the father, I don't care for his choice of abandonment, but I think that Toni Morrison tries to soften the blow. Oh, we got feedback. Tries to soften the blow by allowing him to be a provider, right? Even though $50 a month seems like a drop in a bucket. And so I'm a numbers girl during the day. I'm an accountant, so I had to like just figure out what that meant today, right? And so $50 in the 90s is worth about $123 today. So it still don't feel like nothing. You know, and back then I looked up, like the average price of rent in the 90s was $447. Now that is absolutely a dream we don't have anymore. So I say that to say Sweetness' husband, or Lewis, is only getting a penny worth of grace in this situation for me as a reader. Okay, so next I want to talk about Bride, or Lula Ann. She's the main character in the novel. So we were introduced to her by her given name, Lula Ann Bridewell, and she is tormented by the lack of love and affection from her mother, Sweetness, and how cruel she is to her. So we first hear her voice through a breakup that's initiated by her lover, Booker. And they had a quarrel like about a decision or a promise that Bride made to gift this woman, this convicted child predator, that we'll talk, maybe hopefully get to, Sophia Huxley. She had like this large sum of money saved up for her. She had a $3,000 airline credit and some beauty products to give to this woman. So she had been preparing for this for some time. And later on in the book, we find out that Lula Ann had falsely accused Sophia Huxley, and she spent 15 years in prison for a crime that she didn't commit. And this was all in exchange for Sweetness's love and validation and approval. But Booker, her boyfriend, tells her that she is not the woman that he wants and walks out on her, leaving her confused, which causes her to go down like a rabbit hole of depression and ultimately looking for him. So I'm going to read a little bit about Bride after they've had their fight and he's left. It was raining the next day. Bullet taps on the windows, followed by the crystal lines of water. I avoided the temptation to glance through the panes at the sidewalk beneath my condo. Besides, I knew what was out there. Nasty-looking palm trees lining the road, benches in that tacky little part, few, if any, pedestrians, a silver of sea far beyond. I fought giving in to any wish that he was coming back. When a tiny ripple of missing him surfaced, I beat it back. Around noon, I opened a bottle of Pinot Grigio and sank into the sofa. It swayed in silk cushions as comfy as any arms, almost. Because I have to admit, he is one beautiful man, flawless even, except for a tiny scar on his upper lip and an ugly one on his shoulder. An orange-red blob with a tail. Otherwise, head to toe, he is one gorgeous man. I'm not so bad myself. So imagine how we looked as a couple. After a glass or two of the wine, I was a little buzzed and decided to call my friend Brooklyn, tell her about it, how he hit me harder than a fist with 6 words. You not the woman I want. How they rattled me so, I agreed with them. So stupid. But then I changed my mind about calling her. You know how it is. Nothing new. Just walked out, and I don't know why. Besides, too much was happening at the office for me to bother my best friend and colleague with gossip about another breakup, especially now. I'm regional manager now, and that's like being a captain, so I have to maintain the right relationship with the crew. Our company, Sylvia Inc., is a small cosmetics business, but it's beginning to blossom and make waves, finally, and shed its frumpy past. It used to be Sylph Corsets for discriminating women back in the 40s, but changed its name and ownership to Sylvia Apparel, then to Sylvia Inc., before going flat out hip with 6 cool cosmetic lines, one of which is I named it You Girl. Cosmetics for your personal millennium. It's for girls and women of all complexions, from ebony to lemonade to milk, and it's mine, all mine, the ideal, the brand, the campaign. Wiggling my toes under the silk cushion, I couldn't help smiling at the lipstick on my wine glass, thinking, how about that, Lula Ann? Did you ever believe you would grow up to be this hot or this successful? Maybe she was the woman he wanted. But Lula Ann Bridewell is no longer available, and she was never a woman. Lula Ann was a 16-year-old me who dropped that dumb countrified name as soon as I left high school. I was Ann Bride for 2 years until I interviewed for a sales job at Sylvia Inc., and on a hunch, shortened my name to Bride with nothing anybody needs to say before or after the one memorable syllable. Customers and reps like it, but he ignored it. He called me baby most of the time. Hey, baby, come on, baby, and sometimes you my girl, accent on the my. The only time he said woman was the day he split. The more white wine, the more I thought, good riddance. No more dallying with the mystery man with no visible means of support. An ex-felon, if ever there was, though. He laughed when I teased him about how he spent his time when I was at the office, idle, roaming, or meeting someone. He said his Saturday afternoon trips downtown were not reports to a probation officer or drug rehab counselor, yet he never told me what they were. I told him every single thing about myself. He confided nothing. So I just made stuff up with TV plots. He was an informant with a new identity, a disbarred lawyer, whatever, I didn't really care. Actually, the timing of his leaving was perfect for me. With him gone out of my life and out of my apartment, I could concentrate on the launch of You Girl, and equally important, keep a promise I made to myself long before I met him. We fought about it in the night. He said, you not the woman. According to prisoninfo.org, parole board/calendar, it was time. I've been planning this trip for a year, choosing carefully what a parolee would need. I saved up $5,000 in cash over the years and brought a $3,000 Continental Airlines gift certificate. I put a promotional box of You Girl into a brand new Louis Vuitton shopping bag, all of which could take her anywhere, comfort her anyway, help her forget and take the edge off bad luck, hopelessness and boredom. Well, maybe not boredom. No prison is a convent. He didn't understand why I was so set on going, and the night when we quarreled about my promise, he ran off. I guess I threatened his ego by doing some good Samaritan thing not directed at him. Selfish bastard. I paid the rent, not him, and the maid too. When we went to clubs and concerts, we rode in my beautiful Jaguar or in cars I hired. I bought him beautiful shirts, although he never wore them, and did all the shopping. Besides, a promise is a promise, especially if it's to oneself. So, Bride is interesting character. What I love about her character, is despite how ugly and desirable she is painted in the beginning, she is developed into this drop-dead gorgeous, successful, intriguing woman. And, like she said, she drives a fancy car. She has her her own line of beauty cosmetics, and everything that she has is top of the line. So she's just doing life and living on her own terms, and kind of cuts ties with her mother's sweetness. And she does this by sending money home and maybe writing letters, but never putting a return address on the envelope. So that speaks volumes of how much she wanted to deal with her. But I also feel like parts of Bride are very shallow and very surface and vain. So I want to read all the parts about her, but we don't have that much time. So we'll go into meeting Sophia Huxley a little bit, and let's see. Read 3. And this is after Bride goes and follows this woman after she gets out of prison and goes to a hotel and tries to gift her with all of these things, and she ends up beating her up pretty bad. So Bride. She really was a freak, Sophia Huxley. The quick change from obedient ex-con to raging alligator, from slack lip to fangs, from slouch to hammer. I never saw the signal. No eye squint or grip of neck cords, no shoulder flex or raised lip showing teeth. Nothing announced her attack on me. I'll never forget it. And even if I tried to, the scars let alone, the shame wouldn't let me. Memory is the worst thing about healing. I lie around all day with nothing urgent to do. Brooklyn has taken care of explanations to the office staff, attempted rape, foiled, blah, blah. She is a true friend and doesn't annoy me like those fake ones who come here just to gaze and pity me. I can't watch television. It's so boring. Excuse me, mostly blood, lipstick, and the haunches of anchor girls. What passes for news is either gossip or a lecture of lies. How can I take crime shows so seriously where the female detectives track killers in Louis Vuitton heels? As for reading, print makes me dizzy, and for some reason, I don't like listening to music anymore. Vocals, both the beautiful and the mediocre, depress me, and instrumentals are worse. Plus, something had been done to my tongue because my taste buds have disappeared. Everything tastes like lemons, except lemons, which taste like salt. Wine is a waste, and Vicodin gives me a thicker, more comfortable fog. So the bitch didn't even hear me out. I wasn't the only witness, the only one who turned Sophia Huxley into 0071140. There was lots of other testimony about her molestations. At least 4 other kids were witnesses. I didn't hear what they said, but they were shaking and crying when they left the courtroom. The social worker and psychologist who coached us put their arms around them, whispering, "You'll be fine, you did great." Neither one hugged me, but they smiled at me. Apparently, Sophia Huxley has no family. Well, she has a husband who is in another prison and still unparoled after 7 tries. No one that was there to meet her, nobody. So why didn't she just accept help instead of whatever checked out counter or cleaning woman job she might be given? Rich parolees don't end up cleaning toilets at Wendy's. I was only 8 years old, still little Lula Ann, when I lifted my arm and pointed my finger at her. "Is the woman you saw here in this room?" the lawyer said, smelling of tobacco. I nod. "You have to speak, Lula. Say yes or no." "Yes." "Can you show us where she is seated?" I am afraid of knocking over the paper cup of water the lady lawyer gives me. Relax, says the prosecutor lady, take your time. And I did take my time. My hand was in a fist until my arm was straight. Then I unfolded my forefinger, pow, like a cat pistol. Mr. Huxley stared at me, then opened her mouth as though about to say something. She looked shocked and unbelieving, but my finger still pointed so long the lady prosecutor had to touch my hand and say, "Thank you, Lula," to get me to put my arm down. I glanced at Sweetness, and she was smiling like I'd never seen her smile before, with mouth and eyes, and that wasn't all. Outside the courtroom, all the mothers smiled at me, and 2 actually touched and hugged me. Fathers gave me thumbs up, and best of all, Sweetness. As we walked down the courthouse steps, she held my hand. She had never did that before, and it surprised me as much as it pleased me because I always knew she didn't like touching me. I could tell. Distaste was all over her face when I was little, and she had to bathe me, rinse me, actually, after a half-hearted rub with a soapy washcloth. I used to pray she would slap my face to spank me just to feel her touch. I made little mistakes deliberately, but she had ways to punish me without touching the skin she hated. Bed without supper, bed locked me in my room, but her screaming at me was the worst. Her rules, obedience is the only survival choice, and I was good at it. I behaved and behaved and behaved. Frightened as I was to appear in court, I did what the teacher psychologist expected of me. Brilliantly, I know, because after the trial, Sweetness was kind of mother-like. I don't know. Maybe I'm just mad more at myself than at Miss Huxley. I reverted to Lula Ann, who never fought back, ever. I just lay there while she beat the shit out of me. I could have died on the floor of that motel room if her face hadn't gone apple red with fatigue. I didn't make a sound, didn't even raise a hand to protect myself when she slapped my face, then punched me in the ribs before smashing my jaw with her fist and then butting my head with hers. She was panting when she dragged and threw me out the door. I can still feel her hard fingers clenching the hair at the back of my neck, her foot on my behind, and can still hear the crack of my bones hitting concrete, elbow, jaw. I feel my arm sliding and grabbing for balance, then my tongue searching through blood to locate my teeth. When the door slammed, then opened again, so she could throw out my shoe like a whipped puppy, I just crawled away to even whimper. Maybe he is right. I am not the woman. When he left, I shook it off and pretended it didn't matter. So there we get to see where she finally gets love from her mother. We'll learn later that she falsely accused the woman of doing a crime. And so it makes sense. And unfortunately, one thing everything or most of the characters in this book have in common is that they've all been abused sexually, which made that read hard for me and evoked those emotions. It was almost like God was not helping the children or protecting the children at all. But I'll move on a little bit more about Bride. So this is, she had hired a consultant to help her with her image, and he said to her, "You should always wear white, Bride, only white, and all white all the time." Jerry, calling himself a total person designer, insisted. Looking for a makeover for my second interview at Sylvia Inc., I consulted him. "Not only because of your name," he told me, "but because of what it does to your licorice skin," he said. "And black is the new black. Know what I mean? Wait, you're more Hershey syrup than licorice. Makes people think of whipped cream and chocolate souffle every time they see you. They made me laugh. Or Oreos. Never. Something classy, bonbons, hand-dipped. At first, it was boring shopping for white-only clothes until I learned how many shades of white there were. Ivory, oyster, alabaster, paper white, snow, cream, ecru, champagne, ghost, bone. Shopping got even more interesting when I began choosing colors for accessories. Jerry advising me said, listen, bride baby, if you must have a drop of color, limit it to shoes and purses, but I'd keep both black when white simply won't do. And don't forget, no makeup, not even lipstick or eyeliner, none. I asked him about jewelry, gold, some diamonds, an emerald brooch. No, he threw up his hands. No jewelry at all. Pearl dot earrings, maybe. No, not even that. Just you, girl. All sable and ice, a panther in snow, and with your body and those Wolverine eyes, please. I took his advice, and it worked. Everywhere I went, I got double takes, but not like the faintly disgusted ones I used to get as a kid. These were adoring looks, stunned by hungry. Plus, unbeknownst to him, Jerry had given me the name for a product line, You Girl. So I've thought about the symbolism between bride calling herself bride and the color white being her only choice for what she wore. And if I could sit down and talk to Toni Morrison about what that meant to her, that would be a question I have. And if anybody knows that there's an interview and maybe she talked about this, let me know. Because I'm curious to understand why she chose it. And like, I imagine that she would say, I don't know, something profound and elegant about colorism, and maybe like whiteness is always in the background of our Black existence, but I'm not gonna try to even pretend to be her or put words in her mouth. I just wish I could ask her, and maybe I still can just find the answers as I continue to explore her work. And so for me, when I think of someone who is a bride, like it represents transition, right? Whatever that's from. It could be from being single to being spoken for. It could be from a level of innocence to like womanhood. But for our character, for bride, I think her transition is from pain to love. It's her trying to like love herself, and she is seeking within her what was never instilled in her. And wearing the color white while representing something pure, maybe in this instance, a clean slate, she is able to stand out even more and receive validation or attention that she didn't get from the places she needed them the most. And there's a little bit more on, this for her. So she's sort of pretty under all that black. Neighbors and their daughters agreed. Sweetness never attended parent-teacher meetings or volleyball games. I was encouraged to take business courses, not the college track. Community college, and this is the voice of bride. I kind of started in the middle. I was encouraged to take business courses, not the college track, community college instead of four-year state universities. I didn't do any of that. After I don't know how many refusals, I finally got a job working stock, never sales where customers would see me. I wanted the cosmetics counter, but didn't dare ask for it. I got to be a buyer only after rock-dumb white girls got promotions or screwed up so bad they settled for somebody who actually knew about stock. Even in the interview at Sylvia Inc., got off to a bad start. They questioned my style, my clothes, and told me to come back later. That's when I consulted Jerry. Then, walking down the hall toward the interview's office, I could see the effect I was having. Wide, admiring eyes, grins, and whispers, whoa, oh, baby. In no time, I rocketed to regional manager. See, said Jerry, black sells. It's the hottest commodity in the civilized world. White girls, even brown girls, have to strip naked to get this kind of attention. True or not, it made me, remade me. I began to move differently, not a strut, not that pelvis out rush of the runway, but a stride, slow and focused. Men leaped, and I let myself be caught for a while. And she goes into being kind of destructive, even as she's transitioning from love into finding herself. So men leaped and she let herself be caught. And for a while, anyway, until my sex life became sort of like Diet Coke, deceptively sweet, minus nutrition, more like a PlayStation game imitating the safe glee of virtual violence in just as brief. All my boyfriends were typecast, would-be actors, rappers, professional athletes, players waiting for my crotch or my paycheck like an allowance. Others already have made it, treating me like a medal, a shiny, quiet testimony to their prowess. Not one of them giving helpful, non-interested in what I thought, just what I looked like, joking or baby talking me through what I believe was serious conversation before they found more ego props elsewhere. I remember one date in particular, a medical student who persuaded me to join him on a visit to his parents' house up north. As soon as he introduced me, it was clear I was there to terrorize his family, a means of threat to this nice old white couple. Isn't she beautiful? He kept repeating. Look at her, mother, dad. His eyes were gleaming with malice, but they outclassed him with their warmth, however fake, and charm. His disappointment was obvious, his anger thinly repressed. His parents even drove me to the train stop, probably so I wouldn't have to put up with his failed racist joke on them. I was relieved, even knowing what the mother did with my used teacup. So, yeah, even as she transitioned herself, she was still dealing with the ugliness of people's hatred. So where am I on time? Okay, all right. So I wanted to talk about Booker, who is her lover, because his story really, I feel like, it was what really got me in this book. So I'll just summarize a little bit. He comes from a small town called Whiskey, but he comes from a very loving family, very structured. They do things like have meals together and have like Saturday gatherings where they sit the children around and ask them questions too that I captured. It was, what have you learned that is true and how do you know? And what problem do you have over the year? And what problem do you have? So those are the two questions and things that they would pose and nurture into their children. So their story gets kind of overshadowed, or the death of their son, Adam, and he disappeared first, and then he was later found murdered. And so this is Booker's older brother, who was murdered by a child predator. And this guy was a piece of work. Like, he tattooed his victims' names across his chest. He lured boys in with like a little terrier dog that he had that he named Boy. So Booker lets Adam's death consume him and literally walk him in life. And we find out that his anger with Bride comes from her insisting to gift a sexual predator an opportunity to, relive her life when he is still dealing with the trauma from the nice guy who killed his brother. I'm good. Okay. All right. So I think I'm out of time, but I'll just say, if you guys have not read this or even want to revisit it, I encourage you to do so. It helped me a lot in understanding and being able to reconnect with Toni Morrison's work, because I had to put her work down for a while after this, because the way that she painted the imagery, like, it just burned in my brain. And I was just like, why? Like, why would you write something like that? And I tried to go to like source of self-regard and was like, oh, my vocabulary is not broad enough for this. So, but anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing the space with me.
Thank you, Ray Scott. Thank you so much. We're going to take a couple minutes, so if you want to grab some refreshments, we'll be back in a few minutes with Dr. Carlotta Penn. So I'll make an announcement before we start. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Where's Ray? Did she walk out? Okay, I was saying thank you to her for warming up the stage. Now it's all nice and warm and cozy. And for Bexley Public Library for having me. Can you hear me okay? Because I know the mic was, I'm shorter than Ray, so I can talk right into it. I've entitled my talk or my time, "The Galaxy Accompanying Memory." That's a quote from Toni Morrison. But speaking of memories, before I began, my high school English teacher came up and said hi to me and gave me a pin, a hummingbird. And she is the person who introduced me to Toni Morrison's work and a lot of other Black literature at Columbus School for Girls. So, Miss Ryan, thank you. And it was really special because I don't have a great memory, which I'll talk about when I'm reading, but I think Columbus School for Girls did a pretty good job of making sure there was some Black literature in the curriculum, but I know that it was in Miss Ryan's class. Always. And then I remember, Ms. Ryan, you taught a May program. We have a May program, which is like special classes during the month of May. And you taught one, I don't know if you always did, on Black literature. And so that was just a great experience for me, and I know so many other students who didn't as often get a chance to just really dive into Black literature. So shout out to teachers. My mother was a teacher. Teachers are wonderful people. Yeah. All right, so the galaxy accompanying memory. This is the life story of Cudjoe Lewis, as told by himself. It makes no attempt to be a scientific document, but on the whole, he is rather accurate. If he is a little hazy as to detail after 67 years, he is certainly to be pardoned. The quotations from the works of the travelers in Dahomey are set down not to make this appear a thoroughly documented biography, but to emphasize his remarkable memory. I was sent by a woman of tremendous understanding of primitive peoples to get this story. The thought back of the act was to set down essential truth rather than fact of detail, which is so often misleading. Therefore, he has been permitted to tell his story in his own way without the intrusion of interpretation. So I share that. That's the preface to Zora Neale Hurston's Barracoon. And it's the account of the life of Cudjoe Lewis, who was a Black man who in 1927 was the last surviving person who had been born and raised in Africa before being trafficked across the Middle Passage to the United States. And so she wanted to get his story because he could talk about, both worlds and being caught in between those worlds and all of that. But I open with it because Hurston shares Morrison's belief that memory, with all its chips, blurs, and shifting, memory is treasure. It's history, it's identity, and it's, the perfect fodder for stories. In her novels, Toni Morrison draws on themes of memory, the trauma and tradition of family making, and some of her most celebrated work centers the lives and contemplations of children and mothers' love for them. She has said that her stories were often inspired by these hunks of memory out from which she created whole new worlds. So here are some of Toni Morrison's thoughts on memory. Before I begin, let me plant a seat. My talk will, about halfway through, move to audience participation. So I want you guys to get warmed up to having some discussions, okay? Here are some of Morrison's thoughts on memory. She says, memory, the deliberate act of remembering, is a form of willed creation. It is not an effort to find out the way it really was. That is research. The point is to dwell on the way it appeared and why it appeared in that particular way. She writes, memory then, no matter how small the piece remembered, demands my respect, my attention, and my trust. She writes, the act of imagination is bound up with memory. They straightened out the Mississippi River in places to make room for houses and livable acreage. Occasionally, the river floods these places. Floods is the word they use, but in fact, it is not flooding, it is remembering. Remembering where it used to be. All the water has perfect memory and is forever trying to get back to where it was. Writers are like that, remembering where we were, what valley we ran through, what the banks were like, the light that was there, and the route back to our original place. History versus memory, and memory versus memorylessness. Rememory as in recollecting and remembering, as in reassembling the members of the body, the family, the population of the past. The effort to both remember and not know. She writes, I fret the pieces and fragments of memory because too often we want the whole thing. When we wake from a dream, we want to remember all of it, although the fragment we are remembering may be, and very probably is, the most important piece in the dream. Memory was treasure for Morrison, and so were children. One of her most repeated quotes is, "What is it I have to do that's so important that I'll die if I don't?" There were two things, and the first one was mother my children, and the second one was to write. Mothering her children, she said, as Ray shared with us earlier, it was the most liberating thing that ever happened to me. Liberating because the demands that children make are not the demands of a normal other. The children's demands on me were things that nobody ever asked me to do: to be a good manager, to have a sense of humor, to deliver something that somebody could use. And they were not interested in all the things that other people were interested in, like what I was wearing or if I were sensual. Somehow, all of the baggage that I had accumulated as a person about what was valuable just fell away. I could not only be me, whatever that was, but somebody actually needed me to be that. If you listen to your children, somehow you are able to free yourself from baggage and vanity and all sorts of things and deliver a better self, one that you like. The person that was in me that I liked best was the one my children seemed to want. Morrison believed that how mothers love children shows up differently over time and circumstance. She said, every generation has a kind of love. Some of it's really tough. What my grandmother thought was love of her children was really staying alive for them. What my mother thought was love of her children was to get a better place, maybe get enough money to send you to college if you wanted to. What I thought was love of my children was giving them the maximum amount of freedom, setting an example of how you could make choices in your life. As we all know in Beloved, we see a mother who decides that the best way to love her children is to remove them from life on earth completely. Morrison said that in writing about a mother who kills her daughter to protect her from a life of enslavement, that the legitimate query about motherhood and individuality and freedom and responsibility and all of these questions about love should be asked by the daughter. Of her own childhood and her mother's love for her, she said that her parents assumed, this is her quote, without ever articulating it, that we were capable and quite bright, and in some way morally superior to those who had degraded themselves by trying to degrade us. And that information was so consistent. They seemed to feel that, there were rich people or there were white people or there were wicked people who really had a lot of answering to do for themselves. And we were not like that. So I always felt very special. I always thought that we were on a higher plane than other people. Not because there was fear out there, not because white people could make me into something less, because they never believed that that was the case. What they could do would be to kill me or maim me, but they could never make me be without quality. But Morrison knew that not all children grew up with a strong and unshakable sense of that quality. And not everyone, particularly in the literary world, saw the inherent value in the life of Black girls. The bluest eye, she said, was a consequence of being overcome by the wholesale dismissal of a certain part of the population to which I belonged in history, text, and literature. Of all the characters chosen for artistic examination with empathy or contempt, vulnerable young Black girls were profoundly absent. When they did appear, they were jokes or instances of pity without understanding. No one, it seemed, missed their presence center stage, and no one, it seemed, took them seriously except me. So Morrison made space for a Black girlhood in her novels. She gave Black girls a place to be seen and contemplated. But in addition to The Bluest Eye and several other novels, essays, nonfiction texts, Morrison also co-authored books for children in collaboration with her son, Slade. If we recall that previous quote about motherhood being liberating and a kind of freedom, it's clear that Morrison was inspired by her children. Her confidence was shored up by them. Writing with her son later on in her life highlights this, I think. When asked about writing with her son, Morrison said Slade was, quote, the one who sort of gives me the laughter and joy, and I think I can move along with this, with his help. And this point resonates with me so strongly now as a mother who started writing picture books for my children, a daughter who writes a picture book series inspired by my own late father's story idea. And now my children and I collaborate to rewrite classic fairy tales as animated short films. So I can relate to that joy of feeling that I can do it as long as they're helping it along. So thank you, children, sitting in the front row. Through one of her novel characters that we just heard about again from God Help the Child, Sweetness, Morrison warned, what you do to children matters. And this sentiment is made clear in their picture books, Morrison and Slade's. In the big box, for example, children who don't toe a narrow line are put in boxes and appeased with trinkets and cheap replicas of the real world. In other books, Morrison encourages kids to think about their own moral centers and the paths they might take. And then in Peanut Butter Fudge, it's all about a grandmother who spends a fun day with her grandchildren that includes making a sweet treat together. And in the end, we see the children's mother remembering her own childhood days in the kitchen, making that same family recipe with her mother. About this book, Morrison said, it was impossible not to smile putting this book together, seeing the cheer and love being passed from generation to generation. How many people are familiar with her children's books, have read them in the room? I just found out about them a couple of years ago. And in fact, Peanut Butter Fudge, which we'll talk more about, I read it and didn't even know it was Morrison's book until I returned to it for this. And I said, oh, and my kids love the book. So I think a lot of people don't experience her work for children. I think it's really sweet that she was writing as a grandmother. So, given my focus on themes of memory, family, and childhood in Morrison's work, for the rest of my time, I'm going to invite us all to reflect together on our own memories as inspired by Peanut Butter Fudge. So after a little bit more of Morrison's quotes and memories, we'll show the book, and then I have some questions for us to think about together. So here are a few memories from Toni Morrison's own childhood. This first one is about her great-grandmother. We still played on the floor, my sister and I, so it must have been 1932 or 1933 when we heard she was coming. Millicent McTeer, which is a great name. Did I say that right? Yeah, Millicent McTeer, our great-grandmother. An often quoted legend, she was scheduled to visit all of the relatives' houses in the neighborhood. She lived in Michigan, a much sought-after midwife. Her visit to Ohio had been long anticipated because she was regarded as the wise, unquestionable, majestic head of our family. The majesty was clear when something I had never witnessed before happened as she entered the room. Without urging, all the males stood up. Finally, after a round of visits with other relatives, she entered our living room, tall, straight-backed, leaning on a cane she obviously did not need, and greeted my mother. Then, staring at my sister and me, playing or simply sitting on the floor, she frowned, pointed her cane at us, and said, "These children have been tampered with." My mother objected strenuously, but the damage was done. My great-grandmother was tar black, and my mother knew precisely what she meant. We, her children, and therefore our immediate family, were sullied, not pure. And now here's a memory from her own childhood that deals with her father. She says, all I had to do for the $2 was clean her house for a few hours after school. I want to read that again for my kids. All I had to do for the 2 hours was clean her house for a few hours after school. It was a beautiful house, too, with a plastic-covered sofa and chairs, wall-to-wall blue and white carpeting, a white enamel stove, a washing machine, and a dryer, things that were common in her neighborhood, absent in mine. In the middle of the war, she had butter, sugar, steaks, and seam-up-the-back stockings. I knew how to scrub floors on my knees and how to wash clothes in our zinc tub, but I had never seen a Hoover vacuum cleaner or an iron that wasn't heated by fire. Part of my pride in working for her was earning money I could squander on movies, candy, paddle balls, jacks, ice cream cones. But a larger part of my pride was based on the fact that I gave half my wages to my mother, which meant that some of my earnings were used for real things, an insurance policy payment, or what was owed to the milkman or the iceman. The pleasure of being necessary to my parents was profound. I was not like the children in folk tales, burdensome mouths to feed, nuisances to be corrected, problems so severe that they were abandoned in the forest. I had a status that doing routine chores in my house did not provide, and it earned me a slow smile, an approving nod from an adult. Confirmations that I was adult-like, not childlike. In those days, the 40s, children were not just loved or liked, we were needed. They could earn money, they could care for children younger than themselves, they could work the farm, take care of the herd, run errands, and much more. I suspect that children aren't needed in that way now. They are loved, doted on, protected, and helped. Little by little, I got better at cleaning her house, good enough to be given more to do, much more. I was ordered to carry bookcases upstairs and once to move a piano from one side of a room to the other. I fell carrying the bookcases, and after pushing the piano, my arms and legs hurt so badly. I wanted to refuse or at least to complain, but I was afraid she would fire me and I would lose the freedom the dollar gave me, as well as the standing I had at home, although both were slowly being eroded. She began to offer me her clothes for a price. Impressed by these worn things, which looked simply gorgeous to a little girl who only had 2 dresses to wear to school, I bought a few, until my mother asked me if I really wanted to work for cast-offs. So I learned to say no thank you to a faded sweater offered for a quarter of a week's pay. Still, I had trouble summoning the courage to discuss or object to the increasing demands she made. And I knew that if I told my mother how unhappy I was, she would tell me to quit. Then one day, alone in the kitchen with my father, I let drop a few whines about the job. I gave him details, examples of what troubled me. Yet although he listened intently, I saw no sympathy in his eyes. No, oh, you poor little thing. Perhaps he understood that what I wanted was a solution to the job, not an escape from it. In any case, he put down his cup of coffee and said, listen, you don't live there. You live here with your people. Go to work, get your money, and come on home. And finally, here's a memory of Toni Morrison's mother. My mother had the most beautiful voice I have ever heard in my life. She could sing anything, classical, jazz, blues, opera, and people came from long distances to that little church she went to, African Methodist Episcopal, the AME church she belonged to, just to hear her. She not only sang in church, she sang all day, while she's cooking, while she's gardening, while she's ironing. There was always, and I thought it depended on her mood, what she sang, but for her, it was a way of speaking. So I share those 3 memories just because I think it's interesting to know what was shaping Toni Morrison, and also because it's clear that Toni Morrison came from a home where she was loved, where she was made confident, where she, contemplated the world around her. And I think Peanut Butter Fudge is one way in which she tries to impart that on her own grandchildren. This idea of passing down family recipes and just having fun together and disobeying the mom, which you'll see in the story. So now we can play the story, Peanut Butter Fudge. It's just a read aloud video. And then after that, I'll come back up for some questions.
Sister Academy.
Be a star.
Peanut Butter Fudge by Toni Morrison and Slade Morrison, illustrated by Joseph Peta. Mom's instructions. 12 o'clock lunch. Peas, carrot sticks, fish fingers. 1:15 nap. 2:25 playground. 4 o'clock television. 5 p.m. dinner, hot dogs, macaroni and cheese. 6:30 bath, 7:15 snack, granola bar, 7:30 bed. I will be back at bedtime, Mommy. Snuggle, snuggle, time to rest. Nana joins us in her nest. Nap time is not so long when Nana sings a sleepy song. Looky look, looky look, we get a storybook. Fairies, dragons everywhere, creepy things under the stairs. Pots of gold, a laughing mouse, a peppermint chimney on a house. Hurry, hurry, hop in the car. Let's go fast, let's go far. All around, up and down, Nana takes us through the town. Yummy, lummy, so much happy in the tummy. Look at what our Nana made us. Biscuits, ham, and lemonade-us. Oh my goodness, Nana's sick. Help, find the doctor kit. She's got a fever, her face is hot. Get some water, pour a lot. Band-aid for her toes, Band-aid for her nose. Doctor says you need rest. Quiet while we check your chest. Be good, Nana, take a vitamin pill. We'll make you well, you bet we will. Hold my hand and swing around. Feel the rhythm in the ground. Lift your left foot, now your right. Shake your shoulders with all your might. Let's make the kitty cat. I've got one paw, I've got two. Here's his tail and whiskers too. Here's his play toy, but it doesn't belong. The shape is right, but the color is wrong. Patience, patience, no need for haste. Every piece has its place. Peanut butter fudge, peanut butter fudge. Mommy's coming any minute. Quick, quick, let's begin it. Shh, don't tell, but I can't help it. This recipe's a family secret. Mix it, cook it, cool it, eat it. My mother taught me, and I taught yours. Don't ever forget how it's done, for you will have to pass it on. Ticky-tock, ticky-tock, can we beat that big old clock? Peanut butter, Nana is the best grandmother. Give me a kiss, give me a hug. Peanut butter, peanut butter fudge. The end. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. See you next time.
Thank you. So I wanted to take some time for us to remember our grandmothers, other grandfolks, family recipes and traditions so that we can make space in the present to honor the people and the pieces of memory from our past and how they're shaping us over time. I will just say that this book I can definitely relate to because my children spend a lot of time with my mother and they have more sweets and more TV than the law allows every time they're over there. They get in the kitchen with her, which is something we don't do at home. But they do lots of baking with my mom and I just know that it's something that they look forward to. And when I was younger, I looked forward to going to both of my grandparents' houses. One was not the break the rules type, but the other one was. So I got a little bit of both of those. So this is what I would like to do. I have a few questions. So I'm going to ask the question and ask that you just turn to someone close to you and share your answer. And then I'll ask for some people to volunteer, and we'll go through just a few questions that way. Does that sound good? Okay, so the first one is pretty straightforward. In Peanut Butter Fudge, a babysitting grandmother swaps the mother's schedule for her children for a day of spontaneous fun that ends with making the family's treasured fudge treat. So I just want to know how your memories relate, just kind of like I shared. So if you can talk with someone sitting next to you or behind you about, grandmother memories or grandfather memories, or maybe there was someone else, an elder who you spent time with. Okay, does anyone want to share their memory?
Wait, what am I
Hello? Huh?
What am I supposed to do?
Okay, are we ready to come back, class? Okay, who would like to share a memory? I know someone wants to share because you're all still talking, so you're pretty excited. Anybody want to share? Okay, in the back, Jumper. She's all...
But my grandmother, when we talk on the phone, my grandmother, hi, my name is Dr. Mercy Miller. When my grandmother and I talk on the phone, one thing I noticed is that when I ask her about her recipes or her food or what she's cooking,
Where's Lily going?
it's almost like nicer. That's her love language. And so when I'm hearing this story, I'm associating them cooking with their grandmother with the joy that that seems to evoke. Having those moments of sharing food and cooking food together, it's just like that's what gives her a sense of fulfillment, that nurturing sense. It's very like regenerative for her. And so I'm thinking about my own grandmother and how that seems to bring us closer. And I think we can all attest to the fact that that's especially in all of our homes. It's a shared norm across all cultures. Food is universal. In some cultures, when you come over to the house and I offer you food, I insist that you take it. So it's just beautiful the way that was illustrated throughout the book.
Thank you, thank you. Anybody else? All the way in the back, Jumper. Oh, he beat you again.
Hey, y'all. Hi. For me, I had two grandmothers that could not be any more different. But I will share the most legendary story. So all of my folks are from Mississippi, right? And so all of the interactions I have with them are pretty scarce. But in the ones that I do have, remember, this one I called explicitly Granny. It was always Granny, never grandmother, always Granny. And Granny had a reputation, right? A reputation on the block, because her neighborhood was very rough. And so you didn't go on her yard, you didn't touch her fence, you didn't do none of that. They called her Mama Lion, all right? You did not mess with Mama Lion. And the story that comes up the most around her is, I was over there, I was like, I guess 1 or so, and she was tired of seeing me crawl around on the floor. And one day she just looked at me and said, "Walk." And I stood up. I stood up and I began to walk. And so the story goes, that was the day that I learned to walk, when my granny had said, "It's time." So that's my story.
We have one up front.
My grandmother raised us because my mother couldn't raise us because she was an alcoholic, okay? And my grandmother was a very loving person. She was strict in her own ways, but she took care of her grandchildren. And it was like 4 of us. And then finally, when my mother got herself back on her foot, my mother got back on her feet. I was 18 when I went to see what was going on, and we conversed back and forth. If it wasn't for my grandmother, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I wouldn't be here in this world. And I appreciate everything my grandmother did.
Amen. Thank you. All right, Zach, do we have time for one more question? Okay. So my next question is, Morrison recalls advice from her father that shaped her thinking about the work you do and the person you are, when he said, go to work, come home. So can you think about a piece of advice or life lesson from a parent or elder? So talk amongst yourselves. You have 1 minute for that, and then we'll share out. So a piece of advice or life lesson or anecdote from a parent or elder. Who would like to share, help us improve our lives with some advice from a parent?
So my grandmother always shared words of wisdom. I loved education, and we used to have conversations about what's more important, knowledge or wisdom. And so over a period of time, and I always respected everything she said, but I'm like, I know what I know, and I know that this is what I'm going to do. And I think about that today because she would have loved to have seen me finally get a doctorate. But she said, Kim, knowledge is a good thing. You need that. She said, just remember, though, in your life, wisdom is the thing that's going to save your life. And you need that. And, of course, as an adult, those words resonate, so much in so many ways. So I'm appreciative of that.
Thank
and all
you.
the other deposits.
Yeah, thank you.
I really love the memory that Toni shared of her dad, talking about work, because that's how I connected with my dad. So I would always talk about work or school. And one time I think I was complaining, and he would tell me something that he often told me, and he would say, you have the pedigree and you have the degree, so keep going. And later I realized that he wasn't telling me to remember where I came from, but remember who I come from, and remember what I've accomplished, and allow that to keep me going.
Yeah, thank you. There's someone in the front there in the orange.
Good afternoon. My name is Debbie. For me, I was born in Trinidad, West Indies, in the Caribbean. And for me, it was a transition when I was coming from one country to another. And my mother said to me, I'm sending you away, and you are going to find out that it's a doggy world. But I never did understand what she meant when she said that. And she said, you will find out. I remember this clearly. You will find out, because God will direct you and show you who you are to become the person he intends for you to be. She said, I cannot protect you. You are now on your own. And it took me a while to go through that transition, because she reminded me that when you come up here, education is everything. You continue to persevere in life, because I will no longer be with you. And so her words really stuck with me, and having such wonderful parents, transitioning from one place to another. And one thing she said to me was, when you come to America, they will say that you are black. You have to identify yourself as black. And I said, Mommy, my shoes are black. I found out. I found out, so thank you.
Do we have anyone else who wants to share? Okay, we have a couple more.
I just appreciate everyone sharing today, and I'm going to make this brief. There's a lot that my grandmother taught me growing up. I was born and raised in Chicago, and we lived in the Greystone that my grandmother owned. We lived on the first floor. She lived on the second floor. So as it has been spoken with a lot of women of African descent here, education being important, my grandmother stressed that. But I do recall that not only did she talk the talk, she walked the walk. So when I was a junior in high school, I knew that my grandmother only had an 8th grade education. She went back and got her GED. When I was a junior in high school, and so we sat at the table, we were reading some of the same books in science and all of that. So I would say that not only did my grandmother tell me these things, she embodied them. So she talked the talk and walked the walk. She never really told me things that she wasn't attempting to do herself. And that's embedded in my memory, seeing my grandmother at the table after all those years studying, returning so that she could get her GED, because she had only had an 8th grade education. So just want to.
I think we have one more person in the back.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah.
So, as a young, the oldest of 6, my grandmother always tried to make sure we understand that at the end of the world, it's only you that can feed yourself. So she taught all of us how to cook. And for men in the African home, it was always made like a stereotype that men should not be in the kitchen. So it was always embarrassing initially until she explained to us that the quickest way to the kitchen or to get to the food is to be in the kitchen. And back then, doing all the chores and cooking, I thought it was oh my God, I'm slaving, I'm working so hard. But now, I'm so happy that I learned such basic skills to just be able to feed myself. To the point now, even when people flex on me that, oh, I ate this, I ate that, I just think back my grandma's recipe was way better than that.
Thank you for sharing that. So in my household growing up, I grew up with a mom and dad, and my father was the cook. He did the grocery shopping, he did the cooking, and I didn't think my mother could cook my entire life. I mean, it was never a thought. I never saw her in the kitchen. And then my father passed, and I see that she can cook anything. So all that time, she just didn't cook because he preferred to cook because he liked to eat. And now my brother, I didn't get the cooking gene, so I can't cook, but my brother's always in the kitchen cooking, too. And I said, and sometimes he'll say, I hate cooking. And I'm like, you're always cooking. How can you say you hate cooking? And he says, I don't like cooking, I like to eat. Unfortunately, I like to eat, but I still can't cook. So, and my husband's African, and he didn't get taught to cook, so we're in bad shape in my house. But anyways, it is Valentine's weekend, so I hope that this act of remembering has reminded us to just cherish our loved ones. So love someone today, and thank you all.
Thank you, Carlotta Penn, for that lovely reading. We're a couple minutes behind, so we're going to take a few minutes, and then we will be back on stage with Claudia Owusu. So if you need to grab a drink or use the restrooms, we'll be back in a few minutes. All right, everybody. Let's hear it again for Carlotta Penn. That was wonderful. Thank you. Our next speaker this afternoon is Claudia Owusu. She is a Ghana girl through and through. As a writer and filmmaker, her work divulges the nuance of Black girlhood through a personal and collective lens. Her writing is featured or is forthcoming in Prairie Schooner, The Offing Mag, Chestnut Review, Ninth Letter, Bellingham Review, and elsewhere. Her films have screened internationally at Aesthetica, the New York African Film Festival, Urban World, and Black Star Fest. She is the author of the chapbook In These Bones I Am Shifting from Akashic Books and holds an MFA in creative nonfiction from The Ohio State University. Please join me in welcoming Claudia Owusu.
Good afternoon, everyone. It has been so lovely to be here and to share space with other Black women who are doing such integral and beautiful work. To start off, I'm really just, as Carlotta, really interested in Toni Morrison's work with memory. And so I'm also going to be talking a little bit about that. So I first got into Toni Morrison's work as a senior in high school. And at the time, one of my teachers had gifted me a copy of Beloved. And I really tasked myself with remembering it and reading it that summer. But as hard as I tried, I just could not get past the first page. It just was not for me at the time. And so I circled back on the book. I think perhaps my junior year of college, I was taking an American literature class. And in that class, we were again assigned Beloved. And this time around, I completely fell in love with it, really connected with the story. And I think it's mainly because of Toni Morrison's portraiture that she frames of Black girlhood and womanhood. And as I read, I was really moved by the ways in which Toni Morrison puts together the joys and heartbreaks of Black women without necessarily turning away. And it felt like a call to bear witness. And as a young child, per my bio, I'm Ghanaian. So I grew up in Ghana in this house full of cousins, and being the youngest in the household, whenever a fight would break out, I was always the one running back home to tattle, right? And it was always like, what happened, And so it felt like continuously as I read Toni Morrison's book, this call or this inner conviction or this role that I had taken up in my family to bear witness was being affirmed. And as I've developed as a writer and both a filmmaker, the question that I'm often asking in my work is what happened, who started it, and who walked away hurt? And this question of hurt isn't necessarily about a physical injury, but more so who walked away changed by the thing that had happened. And I think this question even more so as I've developed reading Toni Morrison's books from Beloved to God Help the Child to Sula, Song of Solomon, etc., has really been grounded in this thought that Toni Morrison poses, which is emotional memory, what the nerves and the skin remember, as well as how it happened. And so reading something like that, I think in college, really felt like permission to speculate, permission to dig my feet in, to indulge, to invest as much time as I could in the memory, even if I did not remember it fully. And in this, too, it felt like a conviction that if I remembered correctly, then no one could tell me any different. And so with that being said, I'm going to get into reading an excerpt in The Site of Memory, which is an essay that I came across in my graduate study. And in The Site of Memory, it is, this essay specifically appears in a nonfiction craft book called Inventing the Truth, the Art and Craft of Memoir. And so in this essay, Toni Morrison is essentially talking about what her place is in this craft book about nonfiction as a fiction writer, and the similarities between autobiography and fiction as well. And so I'm gonna be jumping around a little bit and then I'll get back into talking. For me, a writer in the last quarter of the 20th century, not much more than 100 years after emancipation, a writer who was Black and a woman, the exercise is very different. My job becomes how to rip that veil drawn over proceedings too terrible to relate. The exercise is also critical for any person who is Black or who belongs to any marginalized category, for historically, we were seldom invited to participate in the discourse even when we were its topic. Moving that veil aside requires, therefore, certain things. First of all, I must trust my own recollections. I must also depend on the recollections of others. This memory weighs heavily in what I write and how I begin and in what I find to be significant. Zora Neale Hurston said, "Like the dead seeming cold rocks, I have memories within that came out of the material that went to make me. These memories within are the subsoil of my work. But memories and recollections won't give me total access to the unwritten interior life of these people. Only the act of imagination can help me. If writing is thinking and discovery and selection and order and meaning, it is also awe and reverence and mystery and magic. How I gain access to that interior life is what drives me and is the part of this talk which both distinguishes my fiction from autobiographical strategies and which also embraces certain autobiographical strategies. It's a kind of literary archaeology. On the basis of some information and a little bit of guesswork, you journey to a site to see what remains were left behind and to reconstruct the worlds these remains imply. Therefore, the crucial distinction for me is not the difference between fact and fiction, but the distinction between fact and truth. Because facts can exist without human intelligence, but truth cannot. So if I'm looking to find and expose a truth about the interior life of people who didn't write it, which doesn't mean that they didn't have it, if I'm trying to fill in the blanks that the slave narratives left, to part the veil that was so frequently drawn, to implement the stories that I heard, then the approach that's most productive and most trustworthy for me is the recollection that moves from image to text, not from text to the image. I can't tell you how I felt when my father died, but I was able to write Song of Solomon and imagine not him and not his specific interior life, but the world that he inhabited and the private or interior life of the people in it. And I can't tell you how I felt reading to my grandmother while she was dying, and she was not comfortable, but I could try to reconstruct the world that she lived in. And I have suspected more often than not that I know more than she did, that I know more than my grandfather and my great-grandmother did, but I also know that I'm no wiser than they were. And whenever I have tried earnestly to diminish their vision and to prove to myself that I know more, and when I have tried to speculate on their interior life and match it up with my own, I have been very overwhelmed by the richness of theirs compared to my own. I began to write my second book, which was called Sula, because of my preoccupation with the picture of a woman and the way in which I heard her name pronounced. Her name was Hannah, and I think she was a friend of my mother's. I don't remember seeing her very much, but what I do remember is the color around her, a kind of violet, a suffusion of something violet, and her eyes, which appear to be half closed. But what I remember most is how the women said her name, how they said, "Hannah, peace," and smiled to themselves. And there was some secret about her that they knew, which they didn't talk about, at least not in my hearing, but it seemed loaded in the way in which they said her name. And I suspected that she was a little bit of an outlaw, but that they approved in some way. And then thinking about their relationship to her and the way in which they talked about her, the way in which they articulated her name made me think about my friendships between women. What is it that they forgive each other for? And what is it that is unforgivable in the world of women? I don't know what to say about Miss Hannah Peace, and I'm not going to ask my mother who she really was and what did she do and what were you laughing about and why were you smiling? Because my experience when I do this with my mother is so crushing. She will give you the most pedestrian information you ever heard, and I would like to keep all of my remains and my images intact in their mystery when I begin. Later, I will get to the fact. That way, I can explore two worlds, the actual and the possible. What I want to do in this talk is to track an image from picture to text, a journey which appears in the novel that I'm writing now, which is called Beloved. I'm trying to write a particular kind of scene, and I see corn on the cob. To see corn on the cob doesn't mean that it suddenly hovers. It only means that it keeps coming back. And in trying to figure out what is all this corn doing, I discover what it is doing. And I chose this because I'm really, as an artist and a filmmaker, moved by Toni Morrison's work with memory and memory taking shape alongside speculation. And one of my favorite scriptures right now in the Bible comes from 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18. And it says, "And we all with faces unveiled, contemplating the Lord's glory, are being transformed with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Father who is Spirit." And I'm drawing the connection here between this image of Hannah Peace and what it means that Toni Morrison is refusing, asking for more information about Hannah Peace and rather choosing to speculate. So the connection there for me between what Toni Morrison is saying in this essay and 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18 is that any manner of speculation or contemplation has to come with one availing themselves. And so this question of coming with an unmasked face or an unveiled face to the page or to the screen or to the image to see what lies behind. And so in the same way, through Toni Morrison's work, I've really learned to think about memory as something cyclical, something elusive. And in that same spirit of it, I have also felt that conviction to then look into my own community. And this sense of an emotional memory is something that I believe is akin to what Ariane Georges talks about as a form of auto theory, which is putting the body on the same plane as intellect. And in the same way, Hilton Als also talks about making critical theory and introspection a conjoined practice. And so as I was reading The Site of Memory, often at times taking it page by page during my graduate school career. And graduate school is a time in which everybody is writing, everybody knows something, everybody is following some sort of liminal space. And so I really struggled with finding my place there. But I think as I was sitting with The Site of Memory and returning back to it time and time again, it felt like a good place for me to dig my feet in. And so on this thought of emotional memory, and I've been writing so far about my childhood growing up in Accra, Ghana, and immigrating here as a 10-year-old with my 2 brothers. And so at this point, as I had been reading The Site of Memory and thinking about what it means to follow an emotional memory, an exercise that I started doing was closing my eyes, often at times whenever I was at home or at my desk, and envisioning myself or walking myself home from school, from my primary school in Ghana. And so my brothers and I, we attended this school called Christ International Preparatory School. And whenever the bell would ring, if we're standing in front of the gates of the schoolhouse, we had to take a right. And so in my mind, again, at home or at my desk, I would take a right. And then there was this hill that we had to walk up. And so it's like a long path of all of us and our friends walking with our backpacks, et cetera. And so we'd walk the path, and maybe there'd be some shops, convenience stores, et cetera. We're engaging with our friends, and then eventually we all kind of just break off into our different roads and paths to get home. And so when my brother and I would get to the top of the hill, then we'd have to take a left. And so on the left, I still, again, can remember that black gate, and again, bushes, et cetera. And so we're walking, then there's another convenience store, but then we get to somewhat of a cement wall that bridged off the neighborhood into the next neighborhood. And in the cement wall, there was often just a small path, so small that when we're passing through, we had to take off our backpacks in order to fit through it. But in my memory, whenever, again, in this practice of emotional memory and putting my body and my mind and my memories together, whenever I'd get to that point in the neighborhood, I no longer know where to go. So that is always the point at which I can retrace, and then I get there, and then I'm stuck again. And so then what's left for me to do beyond that point except to speculate, in the same spirit of Toni Morrison and Hannah Peace. In the same way, too, in 2023, in the summertime, I went to Ghana, and while I was there, I convinced my aunt, her name is Agatha, and I convinced her to take me back to my childhood home, but this time, this home was the home that, as soon as my mother gave birth to me at the hospital, the home that we went to first, so my first home. And so as we were, going through the neighborhood, and I'm much, much older now, and so it's been years since she herself has been there. My aunt is in the front passenger seat of the taxi. I'm in the back seat, and we're navigating this neighborhood. And so the question that whenever she rolls down her window to ask someone is, do you remember the woman with the house who had a limp and an orange tree in her house? And that's all that she has, and that's all I barely have, right? And so every time we're rolling down the window and asking, do you remember this woman with the limp and the orange tree in front of her house? And everybody is giving us a piece of a story. And we keep circling the neighborhood until eventually my aunt then says bye to the taxi driver because we're running our tab up, and we just get on foot, and then she leaves me on a junction to go walk around by herself for a little bit before she comes back and finds me, and then we find the house. And so there's this sense of when we are thinking about our memories and thinking about what we are able to speculate, I think Toni Morrison's work and her mention of an emotional memory is something that also influenced my filmmaking, namely because it's not so much occupied with what happened, but sort of the excess and the residue and the atmosphere left behind by what happened. And so I think, as I am shaping and coming into my own womanhood, so much of my girlhood has been shaped by Toni Morrison, and even more so now, what I think about the levity of Black womanhood is also shaped by Toni Morrison. And I'm really moved and I think compelled to think about the ways in which Toni Morrison handles atrocities without necessarily looking away, but she holds them with a sense of clarity and openness and a sense of ownership. And that's not always easy, especially thinking about, myself as a Ghanaian woman and thinking about the women that I come from and what it means that we keep secrets and what it means that secrecy is a kind of strength. And so with that being said, thinking about Toni Morrison's movements of play and childlike observation and questioning, I have a poem that I wrote that I'm going to share titled Fishbone. And in this poem, I am, again, trying to do that observational lens that so many of Toni Morrison's girl characters in her book and in her novels are doing, looking through into another woman. Fishbone. We used to claw at our tongues to draw up streaks of blood. I don't know what we were looking for all the way down there. The throat is a place for ululating. The hand gestures and retrieves a curse word overheard from the kitchen when hot oil jumped to kiss my mother's skin. I have been trying to remember how sugar candies in a pot, how choke is different from what Americans mean when they say it went down the wrong pipe. The mouth is all bluff and guesswork. I practice until someone corrects me or sends a voice note breaking down the syllables. When I was a child, a fishbone lodged itself in my throat so deep my face swelled up. I wrapped a silk scarf around it, pretended I had come from a French movie. Some words have sat for so long there is no use pretending. Some words splinter the tongue. And so with that poem, thank you. And so with that poem, again, thinking about this idea of play and observation and speculation and invention, during the winter of 2023, I kind of cycled my way out of order through Toni Morrison's work and found my way to The Bluest Eye. And at first, I had not really come into it knowing the context of the book. I think I just wanted to feel and hear Toni Morrison a little bit closer in that season. It was a particularly lonely season in my life. And so there was something about just driving around Columbus, listening to the audiobook in my car, and then whenever I got home, trying to find the meter and the line in the physical book of where I had been listening to it through. And so with this, I was thinking again about how memory works in The Bluest Eye, especially with the repetition of this is the house throughout the thread of the book. And I was also really interested by the peculiarities of desire, right? There's the desire of Piccola, the desire of Claudia. And I really gravitated towards this book, yes, because her name is Claudia. And it was just nice to have another young girl in a book named Claudia. And particularly because I think Claudia has such an observational lens and just paired up with her wants and her inquiry and her questioning. And, you know, growing up in Ghana, I was the child that was sort of like frowned upon for being in grown folks' business, right? There's even this wording of impenyensem, which means that a child who is too grown for her own good or a child who's too nosy about adults' business. And I felt like in this, The Bluest Eye, Claudia was allowed to have that kind of inquiry without that shame. And something about that kind of brought me back to my childlike self, or my childhood self, rather. And so I was really moved by sort of this freedom of questions and inquiry that only Claudia had in the narrative. And so I'm gonna read two sections, the first being a moment in which Claudia has fallen ill and is throwing up. And she's really narrating it very cinematically and kind of giving a play-by-play of what is happening. And then the second section that I'm gonna read is a moment in which Claudia is thinking about her wants and what it means that she has a want. The puke swaddles down the pillow onto the sheet, green, gray with flocks of orange. It moves like the insides of an egg, stubbornly clinging to its own mass, refusing to break up and be removed. How, I wonder, can it be so neat and nasty at the same time? My mother's voice drones out. She is not talking to me. She's talking to the puke, but she's calling it my name, Claudia. She wipes it up as best as she can and pats a scratchy towel over the large, wet place. I lie down again. The rags have fallen from the window crack and the air is cold. I dare not call her back and am reluctant to leave my warmth. My mother's anger humiliates me. Her words chafe my cheeks and I am crying. I do not know that she's not angry at me, but at my sickness. I believe she despises my weakness for letting the sickness take hold. By and by, I will not get sick. I will refuse to. But for now, I am crying. I know I am making more snot, but I can't stop. My sister comes in. Her eyes are full of sorrow. She sings to me. When the deep purple falls over sleepy garden walls, someone thinks of me. I doze, thinking of plums, walls, and someone. But was it really like that? As painful as I remember? Only mildly. Or rather, it was a productive and fructifying pain. Love, thick and dark as Alaga syrup, eased up into the cracked window. I could smell it, taste it, sweet, musty with an edge of winter green in its base, everywhere in that house. It stuck, along with my tongue, to the frosted window panes. It coated my chest along with the salve, and when the flannel came undone in my sleep, the clear, sharp curves of air outlined its presence on my throat. And in the night, when my coughing was dry and tough, feet padded into the room, hands repinned the flannel, readjusted the quilt, and rested a moment on my forehead. So when I think of autumn, I think of somebody with hands who does not want me to die. And this second passage, also from The Bluest Eye, as I said before, is a moment of want with Claudia that had me, again, thinking about my own want as another Claudia reading the book. Grown people frowned and fussed. You don't know how to take care of nothing. I never had a baby doll in my whole life and used to cry my eyes out for him. Now you got one, a beautiful one, and you tear it up. What's the matter with you? How strong was their outrage? Tears threatened to erase the aloofness of their authority. The emotion of years of unfulfilled longing preened in their voices. I did not know why I destroyed those dolls, but I did know that nobody ever asked me what I wanted for Christmas. Had any adult with the power to fulfill my desires taken me seriously and asked me what I wanted, they would have known that I did not want anything to own or to possess any object. I wanted, rather, to feel something on Christmas Day. The real question would have been, Dear Claudia, what experience would you like on Christmas? I could have spoken up. I want to sit on the low stool in Big Mama's kitchen with my lap full of lilacs and listen to Big Papa play his violin for me alone. The lowness of the stool made for my body, the security and warmth of Big Mama's kitchen, the smell of lilacs, the sound of the music, and since it would be good to have all of my senses engaged, the taste of a peach, perhaps afterward. And so with that section, it's something that I find myself returning back to time and time again, mainly because of this question of, Claudia, what do you want? And I'm often asking myself, what do I want? And even though it is pretty hard to often, fully tell myself the truth, I think it's something that has become somewhat of a refrain in my mind, and has also, again, kind of given me the space and the access to think about my own loneliness and sort of the textures of the relationships between the constellation of women who raised me and the constellation of women who are around me currently. And it also really propelled me into thinking a lot about the domestic, right? And what happens there, and thinking about home as a site of memory, and a home as an archaeological site. And so this past summer, I spent time digging through my father's basement in Columbus, Ohio, the house that I grew up in for the last 18 years. And so I think doing this, again, I was digging through boxes of my brother's old trophies, my notebooks from high school, etc. My father, as a Ghanaian man and as an immigrant, holds on to everything. And I think there's this fine line between hoarding and archiving that I'm still really, sifting and fighting my way through. And so much love to him, but again, he keeps everything. And so as I was going through, I'm finding everything from, shoe boxes to photos of family spanning years. And so one photo that I stumbled across was a photo of my paternal grandmother. And I had never seen her before. My father says I met her when I was younger, but again, I have no recollection or memory of that. And the photograph is this sepia image. It's quite large, shoulders up, her hair is pulled back, her nose is like mine, and she's just staring dead into the camera. And I don't fully know her name or, what year that photo was taken, etc. But it made me think about the sense of Hannah Peace and what it means that Toni Morrison only had that small bit of the utterance with which the women called Hannah Peace, and from then on was able to follow the thread and invent her own narrative about Hannah Peace. And so similarly, as I was digging through this basement, I came across a collection of cassette tapes. This time it was 6 cassette tapes. And so written on it was the name of a woman in my family. And then it was from her to, and it was her husband's name, and it had the year, which was 1999. And so I asked my father about these tapes and why, they were there. And he had shared with me that back in the day, when a loved one lived abroad, you would record your voice on a tape and then mail it to them. And so they would probably receive the tape anywhere from 2 weeks to a month, depending on if you knew someone who was traveling. And then if you didn't, you would just have to wait. So it had me thinking about, again, how stories grow stale with that time of prolonged waiting. And so from this, again, I'm thinking about Hannah Peace and what it means to contemplate and kind of invent around the stories of these women. And so as I've been thinking and speculating, following this thread of Hannah Peace, I recently worked on a documentary after the refrain in in The Bluest Eye, which says, "This is the house." And so the film that I worked on from the things that I found in my father's basement is, titled, "This is the House. If I don't see you, I love you." And it is my own kind of love letter to my father, to my lineage, and thinking about what it means to invent and play around the domestic. And so with thinking about this portrait of my grandmother and thinking also about this recorded voice of this woman, when I finally got to play it in the voicemail, she is often at times reprimanding her husband and talking about a time when she went off on him in anger, and was now thinking about if their marriage could be reconciled. And so in just thinking about how serious and the urgency of that voicemail and how long it might have taken to reach him, I started to invent the textures of what might have happened in between or before or after. And there's a Somali poet named Saadia Hassan, who poses the question, what is the ethos of our mothers? And it's a question that is always ringing in my head, again, in alignment with Hannah Peace, because as a filmmaker, I'm also thinking, if our mothers were behind the camera, where would they turn the lens? And if our mothers were at the page with the pen in hand or with the pencil in hand, what would they be writing about us? And so in the spirit of Toni Morrison, again, I'm coming to the craft with my face unveiled, contemplating. And so I'm going to end on a final poem called Girl Child, which is a little bit, again, about the lineage, both horizontally and vertically, if you will, and thinking about loneliness and how it is seeping through from me upwards and around. So this poem is called Girl Child. I bought the pots and pans on my own with no one at the register. At home, with no one to register, I was alone, the grocery spoiled. I was alone as the grocery spoiled. Greened and moldered, my mother called once. Once I heard her maiden name called, strange and furtive like another life, pressing between another life and another life. Women and moss, slicked back fish in a silver sea. Except I am a gulf, split-lipped from the silver sea. The distance makes love an apparatus harnessed with no one. At the register, I bought the pots and pans on my own. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia Owusu. Let's give it up for Claudia again. We're going to take one more quick break. So again, if you need to get any refreshment or a snack, and then we will be back here in about 4 or 5 minutes with our last reader, Cynthia Amoa. All right. Well, thank you all again for coming out to the Bexley Public Library and celebrating just the brilliance of Toni Morrison, spending the afternoon with us. We know giving up 3.5 hours of your day is no light ask, but this is just to spend this much time with Morrison's work is just an incredible thing we're able to do. And also to invite 3-4 people every year just speaks to the breadth of talent that we have in and around Columbus. Before we get started with our last reader, I just want to kind of highlight a couple things really quick. Again, This Thursday at 7 o'clock, we will have Nimwali Serpel, who is celebrating the release of her new book on Morrison. She will be in conversation with Dion Custer-Edwards, so we would love to see as many of you back at the library if you're available. That would be wonderful. We also have our book club discussing Song of Solomon tomorrow, Monday at 7 o'clock. So if you have read Song of Solomon, if you're just like curious about the discussion, that will be upstairs in the quiet reading room at 7 o'clock. And then AARP Ohio is coordinating a Toni Morrison birthday celebration Wednesday, February 18th, Toni Morrison's actual birthday. That'll be in this room at 1 o'clock. All right, now that I got that out of the way, let's give it up for our readers. What? They're all on our website, bexleylibrary.org, and you can see all of those events there. So again, let's give it up for Ray Scott, Carlotta Penn, Claudia Owusu, and last but certainly not least, Cynthia Amoa is a Ghanaian-American poet, national speaker, and teaching artist, a 3-time TEDx speaker, and a 2025 Greater Columbus Arts Council Artist Elevated Awardee. Yes, big news there. That was awesome. She holds an MFA from the New School and recently served as the inaugural writer-in-residence right here at the Bexley Public Library. She was also the Arts in the Parks coordinator with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. Her work explores themes of identity, migration, and belonging. Her chapbook, Handrails, was published by Akashic Books in fall of 2021. Cynthia lives in Columbus, Ohio with her family, where she leads workshops in poetry, confidence building, and using our voices for social change. You can follow and learn more at cynthiaamoa.com. Please join me in welcoming Cynthia Amoa.
Version, can I stay down here, Zach? Is that okay? Or is there like a camera angle that I need to be?
Can I give you a mic for that online? Yeah, sure. Or just to have one around?
Hello, can we hear me? You can hear me, right? Awesome. Okay. Thank y'all so much for listening. I never take it for granted every time I'm in a room full of folks with listening ears. So can y'all just give yourselves another huge round of applause for being here, for staying all the way to the end of the program. My goodness. Wow, okay. So as mentioned, my name is Cynthia Amoa, poet, speaker, teaching artist. I'm just so humbled to have this gift. I'm humbled that I get to do this, right? This is an opportunity, again, that I don't take for granted. I do want to honor the women that came before me. The piece that I read was a piece honoring Black women, holding space for Black women. And it's not lost on me that I'm sharing the stage this afternoon with many Black women that I don't think I've ever shared a stage with. Claudia, I don't think I've ever shared a stage with you. Oh my goodness. I was telling Ray that, yeah. And then I think Carlotta is not here anymore, but yeah, I don't think I've ever shared a stage with any of these women. So can we also just give another huge round of applause to the Black women that came before me? So we're talking all things who? All things Toni Morrison, right? I found it incredibly interesting that Toni Morrison's birthday falls a few days after Valentine's Day, right? Yesterday was Love Day. Did we have a good Love Day? Yes, we did for the most part. Okay. And so I think when I am centering and thinking of all of Toni Morrison's works, the one thing that comes to mind, or the one thing that I believe she is continuously writing around and trying to get around, is love. Is the idea of love, the concept of love, is spaces and circumstances and scenarios that exist when love is absent, right? It is Sethi's incredibly revolutionary act of ultimately killing her child so that she does not have to live in the reality of slavery, right? It's in Sula, the power of friendship, and that being the thing that I think was heralded, or the thing that was highlighted over maybe a romantic love or a marriage love. And so if it's all right with y'all, I think I want to steep today's time in love. And I think what I'm going to do is ask questions. And I think I'm also going to draw from essays in The Source of Self-Regard, which is just a collection of essays, speeches, and works by Toni Morrison. And then I think the third thing I'm gonna do is was trying to find ways that my own work was in conversation with Toni Morrison without me actually even realizing that it was in conversation with Toni Morrison. So what's gonna happen is I think I want to ground us in a question, and then I'm going to read the essay, and then I think I'm going to share my own work, and then we're gonna wrap up our time in space today, if that's okay. I'm gonna do it in two kind of separate segments. So my introduction to Toni Morrison was through an English teacher of mine by the name of Miss Fitzgerald. I just had a coffee date with her the other day. She was my 8th grade English teacher. She introduced me to my own voice through the way of a Poetry Out Loud national recitation competition. So Miss Fitz, what she would do is allow her students in the classroom to choose and recite the works of other famous poets. And it was then our job to communicate or translate what we thought the experience of the poet was trying to communicate on stage. And it's a contest, it's a competition. It's a national competition for students to do this. And it was the way that I first found my voice. I competed twice in the competition, and I lost twice in the competition. I took the L, it's all right. But the W for me was that I could speak in a room and that people would listen. And the I guess maybe power representation of who Miss Fitz was in my life also allowed me to become a teaching artist, to also help young people almost access and find their own voices, right? And when I graduated, Miss Fitz gave me Sula. She wrote in my little card that she wanted me to continue investigating my voice. She wanted me to never stop the beginnings of almost what I started in her classroom. And so that is not lost on me, and that was almost my entrance into Toni Morrison's work, and have since kind of been in many rooms, many spaces where her name has been brought into. I'm just so grateful to the legacy that she's left behind in just creating space for me to also be who I am as a Black woman writer, ultimately. Okay, so I am going to jump in. Let me make sure I got everything. I'm going to jump into the very first segment of my talk by opening the room with a question. What is a metaphor for love? What is a metaphor for love? Now, your response, because I would love if y'all could talk to me. I'm the type of like performer and writer and speaker that like engages with her audience, right? And so the response could be just one word. The response could be, a phrase, and on and on and on and on. But I want you all to reflect on this very first question, just to open up our space. What is a metaphor for love? And anyone, we can kind of popcorn style it around in the room. Yes, Leslie. Do you want the mic? Okay.
I'm thinking a doorway.
Okay. Okay.
Like seeing where you are, but leading you into what you can be.
I love that. Okay, we have a doorway. What else do we have? Sorry, I'm like writing. I'm taking words from the room. Yes.
I just keep hearing practice.
Okay.
Practice.
Yeah.
Sacrifice.
I like that. I like sacrifice. Safety. Time. Beautiful work. Okay. Love is a bench. Okay. I love that. Is anybody else? And please let me know so I can like bring you the mic if you actually want to get up and describe to us.
I keep hearing, like in my mind,
Yeah.
a suitcase.
Okay.
Like you carry it, you unload it, you travel with it, you
Okay.
journey with it.
Okay.
And it holds space, it holds multitudes. And just when you forget it, you gotta pack it up again.
Yeah. Yes.
Thinking of love as a garment.
As a garment. Okay. Okay. I love that. I love these metaphors. So if love is a garment, if love is a suitcase, if love is a bench, if love is a doorway, a practice, what is a kind of love that has allowed you to become more of yourself? A kind of love that maybe has allowed you to belong? Community. Okay. I would say Black womanhood. Yeah. Okay. Sisterhood, Black womanhood, sisterhood, community. Consistency. So sometimes we're thinking of love as a person, a character, but it could also be these intangible concepts, right, that we're talking about. Okay. Okay. Ooh, okay. A bite of a really good piece of food. Nice. Yes. Rest. Okay. Okay. A what? A long walk. Okay. So we got rest, we got long walk. Okay. Okay. Sure. So I'm asking these questions because of what I think I mentioned already, with love being these really intangible objects that we cannot grasp, that we cannot hold, but also we could go all day with defining love in this room, right? Like, we could go on and on and on and on. And I think oftentimes when I think of safety, I'm also thinking of belonging. I explore my identity a lot in my work. I'm continuously asking questions. It's almost like I'm investigating who I am, and the answers aren't necessarily important as it is the journey and the exploration to maybe potentially getting an answer, maybe not, right? And so I think what I'm gonna do, by shaping love as belonging and love as safety, just to open us up, is share an excerpt from one of the essays in this piece titled Home. And then I think I'm going to quite literally be in conversation with the essay, with Toni's ideas and her concepts in the essay, with a piece of my own work titled Belonging, if that's all right. So on, let's see, page, I have notes. Okay. So again, this essay is titled Home. I think I'm just gonna jump in. Last year, a colleague of mine asked me where I had gone to school as a child. I told her Lorain, Ohio. Then she questioned me. Were your schools desegregated then? I said, what? They were never desegregated in the 30s and 40s, so why would they be desegregated? Besides, we had one high school and 4 junior high schools. Then I recalled that she herself was around 40 years old when that term desegregated was alive everywhere. Obviously, I was in a time warp, and obviously the early diverse population of the town I grew up in was not the only way of the country. Before I left Lorain for Washington, D.C., then Texas, then Ithaca, then New York City, I thought every place was more or less like it, except in size. Nothing could be further from the truth. In any case, her questions made me think anew about this area of Ohio and my recollections of home. This region, Lorain, Oberlin, is not like it was when I lived there. But in a way, it doesn't matter because home is memory and companions and or friends who share the memory. But equally important as the memory and place and people of one's personal home is the very idea of home. What do we mean when we say home? It is a virtual question because the destiny of the 21st century will be shaped by the possibility or the collapse of a shareable world. The question of cultural apartheid and or cultural integration is at the heart of all governments and informs our perceptions of the ways in which governance and culture compel the exoduses of peoples, voluntary or driven, and raises complex questions of dispossession, recovery, and the reinforcement of siege mentalities. How do individuals resist or become complicit in the process of alienizing others' demonization, a process that can infect the foreigner's geographical sanctuary with the country's xenophobia? By welcoming immigrants or importing slaves into their midst of economic reasons and relegating their children to a modern version of the undead, or by reducing an entire native population, some with a history hundreds, even thousands of years long, into despised foreigners in their own country, or by the privileged indifference of a government watching an almost biblical flood destroy a city because its citizens were surplus Black or poor people without transportation, water, food, help, and left to their own devices to swim, slog, or die in hospitals, jails, boulevards, and holding pens. Such are the consequences of persistent demonization. Such is the harvest of shame. Clearly, the movement of peoples under duress at beyond and across borders is not new. Forced or eager exodus into strange territory, psychological or geographical, is indelible in the history of every quadrant of the known world, from the trek of Africans into China and Australia to military interventions by Romans, Ottomans, Europeans, to merchant forays fulfilling the desires of a plethora of regimes, monarchies, and republics. From Venice to Virginia, from Liverpool to Hong Kong, all these and more have transferred the riches and art they found into other realms, and all these left that foreign soil stained with their blood and or transplanted into the veins of the conquered, while in their wake the languages of conquered and conqueror swell with condemnation of the other. Thank y'all once again for listening. I think her definition or her exploration of home in that brief excerpt that we just listened to is something that I'm also dealing with in this piece that I would love to share, and it's entitled Belonging. The first time I went home, my cousins said I was only a Sunti because my mother tells me so. They meant I could not live in one place and dare belong somewhere else, so I gathered all of my first attempts at tree and asked in a language broken near the edges of my mouth, how could this be? The hope of floating has carried me so far, and all of it belongs to me. Even village roads, the color of papyrus roots, all the trotros honking and honking, a rooster's morning tune. The tree my father broke his back trying to climb belongs to me. Hawkers assembled under the June day clouds to sell pure water sachets, sugar cane, each small round peanut, the tarnished sky spreading across my skin like an open palm. Listen, I think this must be it. The rest that was promised us, found under Accra city skylines, the mango sun thick and growing overhead, people whose tongues summon our names without breaking it. Yes, this belongs to us too. The farmlands tendered by generations of gentle hands, the wind soft caressed of red dust, the voices cutting through the heat to find us. What I am trying to say is, home is what you make of it. A name is a name regardless of its spelling. Our identity is found blooming in every corner of this room. Home is not a place kept in some sort of better shape. Home is a woman draped in orange or a dress of red netting with skin as dark as the night, with a gaze as sharp as the knife. Home is a color or something resembling water. What I am trying to say is, what difference is land to an open river if we are unable to cross both? This is what I think artists are trying to say too. When we write or whisper or tell the truth, we speak to those of us who swore their need to be with us was greater than our need to be with ourselves. Give me a tale, true or not, in which we speak a new language, hum a new sound for our identity to take on a new meaning. Today, my identity, your identity, we, us, our identity takes on a new meaning. So does home, so does country, so does community. What I am trying to say is the ocean will stay an ocean even after it eats the land, and all we have is left room to plant our art, our names, our faces, our joy blooming joyfully in every direction. We are trying to say we carry our identities with us, and all of it belongs to us. And what matters is not how beauty arrives, but that it comes. What matters is not how beauty arrives, but that it comes home. Thank y'all so much. I often like to say that it almost feels like I live in the hyphen of my identity being Ghanaian and American. Both worlds belong to me, but they also kind of don't. Like, it feels like I'm defining and making home in spaces and places that I traverse, that I visit continuously. When I'm home and I speak Tree, I don't say it just right. When I'm here and I'm still trying to kind of communicate with my family and my mom in our native tongue, and also just by way of being, I'm not quite fully American. Right? There's something still different about me. And so, again, continuously investigating identity and belonging. And I so appreciate Morrison almost doing the same. She continuously highlights Blackness, continuously highlights identity in this really incredible way that I would be remiss if I don't mention, and also almost feels like I'm carrying this mantle that she's given because I'm doing it in my own identity continuously, right? And so just wanted to open the space with love as belonging. The second section that I think I would like us to move to as we wrap up our time today is love as language. Love as language. So my question for you is, who first spoke words over you that made you feel loved? Who first spoke words over you that made you feel love? Your grandmother, yeah. Who else? Hello? Hello. We love that. Okay. Who else? Who first spoke words over you when we're thinking of love as language that made you feel loved or seen or heard? Huh. Yeah. Any particular artist? Or any particular song? I know I'm asking you to pick just one. I know. An English teacher. I love alignment because I feel like grandmother is coming up as a response for this question, but grandmother also came up in Carlotta's segment, right? I was just talking about Miss Fitzgerald being the person that kind of first saw something in me, and Claudia mentions an English teacher. So I'm loving how almost cyclical this information we're sharing is. Who else? Can we think of a face, a name? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Stevie Wonder's a good one. Yeah.
What blackness meant, what humanity meant, and all that. So, and love.
Yeah. Stevie Wonder's a great one. Yes. Okay. Yes, she is. Yeah.
And then for the music, what would I be without NDRE?
Huh. But you can't bring NDRE in here without bringing Lauryn Hill in, though. You know? She's like, nah. Yeah. Sure, absolutely. Yeah. About ourselves, about our hair, about our identity. Yeah. All of these are really great responses. Is love something we feel or something we practice through language? Is love something we feel or something we practice through language? Yes, and why? Why either way? Is it something we feel or something we practice through language, or both, and why? Love is language.
I would say the practice is driven by the emotion. Like sometimes you won't engage in certain behaviors if you don't have that emotion, or the person could be the object of the behavior.
Yeah.
I want to say both, but I brought the word practice in. I feel like love is a practice. I don't think love belongs to us. I don't even think to put it in the realm of a feeling is to limit it. So I think it's something you practice, and I think our feelings and our experiences move us towards it.
Yep.
I think it's just something that's there.
Yeah.
I think I had to see it. My grandparents, and I have a lot of German in my background. So
Yeah.
they're not Italian. They're not, gonna hug you
Yeah.
and say all these wonderful things to you. But they cooked.
Yeah.
And they made their homemade noodles. They were pretty new to this country. And going down there, I saw love at the table. And as a member of that group there, I felt that the belonging was the love.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I also want to name, it's an embodiment. And it's an understanding of, it's never too late to embody that.
Yeah.
The word that struck when you were reading the excerpt from Toni's book, recovery, and I'm someone who's really passionate about recovery-centered work and repair. And so it's never too late to say, I have this understanding and I want to implement it.
Yeah.
And that can evoke that feeling.
Thank you all for sharing. Yeah. Did you want to share something else?
Now that I got started. I noticed too that no one mentioned suffering, and I'm 77, I'm a widow, and love to me also has a component of suffering.
Yeah.
Willingness to suffer. And if you're not willing to suffer, you can't love. I mean, doesn't that?
Yeah. That's incredible because Toni, I see your hand. Toni deals with, I believe, really heavy and dark concepts, such as slavery, right? But in the midst of, the reader almost grappling with these heavy, dark things, is a glimpse in a moment of tenderness, is a glimpse in a moment of love. And I think it's interesting that you mentioned that suffering has to be present, because I think what she's ultimately doing is clearly showing us that love can exist in moments and spaces and circumstances where it just doesn't seem like it should. And so, yeah, love and suffering and having that kind of be side by side is always something that's interesting to share. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
I think over all your questions, the word that keeps coming to my mind for all of them was like vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I feel like love is like a practice of vulnerability, and even like being vulnerable to sometimes submitting to the discomfort, the grief,
Yeah.
that comes with loving.
Yeah.
And I think that it's like,
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. So as we're, again, thank you everyone for sharing, but as we are, I guess, maybe thinking of love as language, I want to share a brief excerpt in this essay of Toni's called The Noble Lecture in Literature. It wasn't until I think I read this that I really realized that love can exist as a form of action, but this to me was like steeped in the idea that love can exist in language, and very much so. I recently got engaged. And when I say recently, I mean like 6 months ago. Thank y'all so much. So you see why I'm talking about love? Y'all see that? I knew that relationships were complicated, that they were challenging. But I think it wasn't until I really got in this more recent relationship with my fiance, not me laying y'all into my business, that I really realized that like I can say things to him in a different way and still get my point across. Like it's not the same as if I'm talking to like a girlfriend or a friend or even my own mother, right? But I recognized that he received things a little bit differently based on how I said it. And I found that incredibly interesting and had never before stumbled upon this experience. It's always important for me to be authentic and show up in spaces through the experiences that I'm going through right now. And that's just one that I recognize as I'm kind of preparing and thinking through this section of just holding love as language. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share a brief excerpt in this essay, and then I'm going to share another piece of my own work, and then I guess we can wrap up from there if that's all right with y'all. Is that all right? Yes, thank you. Okay. The Noble Lecture in Literature. Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind but wise. Or was it an old man, a guru perhaps, or a griot, soothing restless children? I have heard this story, or one exactly like it in the lore of several cultures. Once upon a time, there was an old woman, blind and wise. In the version, I know the woman is the daughter of slaves, Black, American, and lives alone in a small house outside of town. Her reputation for wisdom is without peer and without question. Among her people, she is both the law and is transgression. The honor she is paid and the awe in which she is held reach beyond her neighborhood to places far away, to the city where the intelligence of rural prophets is the source of much amusement. One day, the woman is visited by some young people who seem to be bent on disproving her clairvoyance and showing her up for the fraud they believe she is. Their plan is simple. They enter her house and ask the one question, the answer to which rides solely on her difference from them, a difference they regard as a profound disability, her blindness. They stand before her, and one of them says, "Old woman, I hold in my hand a bird. Tell me whether it is living or dead." She does not answer, and the question is repeated. Is the bird I am holding living or dead? Still, she doesn't answer. She is blind and cannot see her visitors, and let alone what is in their hands. She does not know their color, gender, or homeland. She only knows their motive. The old woman's silence is so long, the young people have trouble holding in their laughter. Finally, she speaks and her voice is soft but stern. "I don't know," she says. "I don't know whether the bird you are holding is dead or alive, but what I do know is that it is in your hands. It is in your hands." Her answer can be taken to mean, if it is dead, you have either found it that way or you have killed it. If it is alive, you can still kill it. Whether it is to stay alive, it is your decision. Whatever the case, it is your responsibility. So I wanted to share that because I believe that is, as the blind woman, that is really our role almost as the reader. It almost feels like we're not trying to determine whether a bird is alive or dead, but that the story exists and that we are a part of the story almost, that we're sharing in this experience of the story. And so I wanted to share that piece in collaboration with this piece that's untitled. There is so much happening in our time right now, and it really feels like this is the time where we can use language as love. This is the time for artists. This is the time for writers. This is the time where I think Toni almost urged us to show up in our many gifts. Even if you are not a writer in this room, you can still do and be something, right? And so this piece came to mind when I read that excerpt in her essay. And I hope that it reminds you of the hope that can exist even when so much is happening around us that's challenging, that's complex. You can still show up, whether you be the language maker or whether you be the homemaker, you're making food in the kitchen and such. And so this is untitled. Lately, I've been relearning how to look at my life. The parts I once called insignificant, the artist work I do that isn't glamorous, the beauty I didn't know it all holds. I smile at my supervisor and say, the artist wants her voice heard, wants to be valued for her work, and she says, what does art mean in a world that's burning? As if meaning isn't made in the fire. And this conversation won't rewrite policy overnight. It won't hand me a diploma. It won't end with an applause or an award, but I believe my words do the slow work of tearing at the fabric of our culture, of holding a name in a room a person does not yet exist in. It is uncelebrated labor. And this is how I think we're going to change the world. This is often the most transformative work. This is what I'm asking you to do. Building relationships with your neighbors, cooking, making art and movements, listening, and all the other millions of skills that would never have a place on your resume. This is what I'm asking you to do. I'm asking that you pay attention. Think about the parts of your day that you do not tell people, the gray areas that do not make it into your interviews. This is the most important part of your identity and what I'm inviting you into. A changed world, if only we could see it. A leadership that means service, a quiet power you dare exude. It is happening in this room because you're here, because you showed up on the front lines one day and learned resilience was not the absence of breaking, but the practice of rebuilding. Leadership happens when we reach sideways, arms outstretched, holding on to one another for dear life, trying to remember a kind of interdependence. Our policies, our titles, and our anxieties keep trying to erase. I'm asking, what does it mean to lead in the spaces you occupy? For me, that means language and poetry. For you, it could mean a break room, a boardroom, a classroom, a kitchen table, a voting booth, a conversation, a relationship. And truth is, you already have resources at your disposal. Wisdom in your body, community in this room, tools in your hands you may have been waiting for permission to use. Together, I think we can change the world when we remember that alone we are nothing, and how beautiful that is. How beautiful that is, because it means they don't know what we'll build next. Thank you so much. Experimenting with this idea of centos. Does anybody know what a cento is? We know what a cento is. Leslie, I think you know what a cento is. What is a cento? Can you share with everybody?
So a cento is a poem that is made up of lines or phrases from other poems.
Yes. For the past 2 to 3-ish years, I've been experimenting with this form of centos because I deeply believe in found language, and I almost don't want to forget the really impactful and really powerful things that have been mentioned to me. And so every space that I'm in, I try my best to write a cento. Now, it doesn't always sound like a poem, y'all. I wrote one today while Ray was talking, when Claudia shared her pieces with us, right? Some of the responses and feedback we gave during Carlotta's segment of her talk. And so I figured maybe I'd share it. It might not sound right, but can y'all please clap anyway? Thank you. This piece is titled, What Toni Taught Us. So this could also be like lines and language from like conversations I heard in the room, her essays that have been shared as well. Again, might not make sense. It could be a poem. It could be something. What Toni taught us. Here is what we recall. What happened. For a writer who is Black and a woman, the exercise of writing is very different. This memory weighs heavily on how we find where to begin. We together are trying to write a particular kind of scene. How else could we hold on to a little dignity, our emotional memory? Here is what we recall. Who started it? There is something so valuable that happens when we become mothers. We are mothers and nurturers, and it's probably our superpower if you choose to see it this way. Toni is our mother, our mama lion, our guide and hope, who shows us that we are poets and writers, and we all have something to say, to hold on to love, to belong to a bench or something safe, and we, her children, are the best art she has ever made. Here is what remains, a list of questions I urge you to explore. Who walks away hurt? Who walks away healed? Who will dare turn to 2 Corinthians 3:18? And was it really as powerful as we remember? What does the nerve in the skin remember? Remember, who first spoke words over you that made you feel loved? Remember, writing is also awe and reverence and mystery and magic. When we think of Toni, we think of someone with hands, someone who does not want us to die. Thank y'all so much.